We're going to continue going over Nukhbat Al-Fikar by Ibn Hajar Al-Asqalaniyy. This is just the text only. And I'll only add in explanation what needs to be added, insha'Allah ta'ala. And we'll reserve going over the explanation for another time if Allah granted us that. So the author talked about, the last thing he talked about was what makes a hadith authentic. Now, if I don't review that, if I don't repeat those conditions, what will you know? I'm assuming you were here for last session. So if you were here for last session, then I should be able to keep going without repeating anything from the last session, because you took it, you learned it, you reviewed it, and then you were waiting for the next lesson. So now we're going to talk about, we'll start by talking about the Hasan hadith. He says, may Allah have mercy upon him, فَإِنْ خَفَّ الضَّبْطُ فَالْحَسَنُ لِذَاتِهِ. If the precision of the narrator is light, so he's not at the highest level of mastery of precision and accuracy, which is that one who has what I called an impeccable memory. His mistakes are rare. He can recall what he memorized whenever he wants. If someone is not at that level, but he has the other conditions of acceptability, he's adl, trustworthy, narrating also from someone who's like him, adl, trustworthy, and all the other conditions of acceptability are there. It's just that this one hasn't reached the level of, for example, Bukhari and Ash-Shafi'i in memorization, and Suyuti, etc. So his accuracy is less. For example, he needs his books, and he takes care of his books so that he can narrate from them precisely. Then فَالْحَسَنُ لِذَاتِهِ, then the hadith is Hasan. It's a fair hadith. By itself, it's fair. It doesn't need anything else to make it fair. وَبِكَثْرَةِ طُرُقِهِ يُصَحَّحْ, and by having many pathways, many chains of narration, or multiple chains of narration, by multiplicity of its pathways, this fair hadith, yusahah, it becomes sound, authentic, sahih. But it's not going to be sahih by itself. Now it's going to be sahih by other than itself. Sahih by something else. Without this, it's fair by itself. And with this, it's sound by something else, not by itself. That something else is whatever bumped it up to the level of sahih. فَإِن جُمِعَا, now if both descriptions are mentioned together for one hadith, so if it were said about a hadith, حَسَنٌ صَحِيح وَالْحَدِيثُ حَسَنٌ صَحِيح, this hadith is Hasan Sahih. Maybe we can put a dash there when we render it into English. This hadith is a Hasan Sahih hadith. So, فَإِن جُمِعَا, if both descriptions were mentioned together for one hadith, so before we go forward, what's the issue there? The issue is that there's a contradiction between these two descriptions. Because when you say Hasan, it means lacking the highest levels of acceptability. When you say Sahih, it means having the highest levels of acceptability. Yes, they have something in common, Hasan and Sahih, which is that they both fulfill the conditions of acceptability, but one of them is lacking the highest levels and one of them has confirmed for it the highest levels. So what then about calling a single hadith Hasan Sahih? فَلِلتَّرَدُّدِ فِي النَّاقِلِ حَيْثُ التَّفَرُّدِ, then that's because of hesitation about the transmitter when it's a single hadith, when it's a hadith that only has a single pathway. So that narrator, there's hesitation about him. Is he a narrator of Hasan or he's a narrator of Sahih? Then in this case, some will call it Hasanun Sahih. Wa illa, but if it's not a case of being a single hadith, yani from a single pathway, if it's not a case of being from a single pathway, we're talking about a hadith being described as Hasan Sahih. If it has two chains, this hadith, one of them is Hasan and the other is Sahih, then this is another reason for calling it Hasan Sahih. So there, some scholars use the term Hasanun Sahih. Ibn Hajar is telling you that can be for one of two things. It could be that it's a single pathway for this hadith, then it's because there's hesitation about the narrator. Is he a Hasan narrator or a Sahih narrator? Or it's a case of a hadith having two chains. One chain is a Hasan chain and the other chain is a Sahih chain. And if that's the case, then if it's only for a single pathway, then when they say Hasan Sahih, it really means Hasan or Sahih. And when it has two chains and they say Hasan Sahih, then it means Hasan and Sahih. Then that one's going to be stronger, that second one. By the way, whose terminology is that? Who says Hasan Sahih? Who's famous for that? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. At-Tirmidhi. That's famously the terminology of Imam At-Tirmidhi. And the scholars, they went back and forth a little bit about explaining the words of At-Tirmidhi. And this explanation here, that's what Ibn Hajar Al-Asqalaniyy says. And according to him, Allah fataha alayhi fi hadha. Yani, Allah guided him to be the one who gave the clear explanation for what At-Tirmidhi and his likes were saying when they said that. Inshallah, we can come around another time to delve into that. وَزِيَادَةُ رَاوِيهِمَا مَقْبُولَةٌ, and the addition of their narrator, the narrator of those two, rawihima, That's the Hasan and the Sahih. The addition of the narrator of those two acceptable hadiths, that addition is maqbula, is acceptable. Meaning, there's a rendition of a hadith that has something that another rendition doesn't have. So what's the judgment of the addition? It's acceptable. As a rule of thumb, the scholars said, Man hafidha hujjatun ala man lam yahfaz. Whoever memorized, he's a reference over whoever did not memorize. Whoever memorized is a reference over who did not memorize. Someone recently asked me a question, I didn't know the answer. And then when I said I don't know, they told me what Sheikh Fulan said. This is the answer. So khalas, take what he said. Man hafidha hujjatun ala man lam yahfaz. He doesn't speak with ignorance. The one who memorized, he's a reference over the one who didn't memorize. So the addition of the narrator of the Hasan or Sahih hadith is acceptable. ما لم تقع منافية لمن هو أوثق, as long as it didn't fall in contradiction or it didn't fall contrary to who is more reliable, as long as it didn't fall in opposition to who is more reliable. Being more reliable includes having better memory and also includes being more numerous. Like one person said something, but it's against what 3 people said or 5 people said. فَإِنْ خُولِفَ بِأَرْجَحٍ. So if this report, the report of a trusted reporter, is opposed by something more preponderant, so it means we have 2 reports from trusted sources. Each one by itself doesn't have anything that's by itself is bad against other fundamentals. Because there's just fundamentals that can't be breached. We already learned about many of those fundamentals, or else we wouldn't be having this lesson now. And maybe some people didn't get those fundamentals, but Allah gave them a door to get in to hear this lesson. So one should have fundamentals first. So we're talking about here 2 reports, each from trusted sources, and each one on its own doesn't go against any of the fundamentals. So it doesn't look like there's anything wrong with either one of them. But when we put those 2 together, they contradict each other in a way that we can't put them together. فَإِنْ خُولِفَ بِأَرْجَحٍ. So if the report of a trusted reporter is opposed by something heavier, more preponderant, or weightier, فَالرَّاجِحُ الْمَحْفُوظ. Then the weightier report is the preserved report. That's the preserved one, because we have to get rid of one. وَمُقَابِلُهُ الشَّاذ. And what's contrary to that is the irregular report or the anomalous report. So what's that irregular or anomalous report? That's the report from a trusted source that does not have any apparent defect in it. There's no apparent defect in it that made us reject it. It was because there was something more reliable that made us reject it. وَمَعَ الضَّعْفِ فَالرَّاجِحُ الْمَعْرُوفُ. And when you have 2 reports that conflict with each other, but one of those comes from a weak source, and one of those comes from a trusted source. فَالرَّاجِحُ الْمَعْرُوفِ. Then the preponderant one, which is going to be, of course, from the trusted source, that's compliant. This is the one that's compliant. وَمُقَابِلُهُ الْمُنْكَرُ. And the other one that came from the weak source, that's objectionable. Munkar. So what are we talking about here? This line and a half approximately is giving us two cases. These two cases have something in common. What are these two cases? These two cases, what's the common thing between these two cases? The common thing between them is we have two reports that conflict with each other. That's what they have in common. What's the difference between these two cases? The difference is, in one case, both reports come from trusted sources. So then you're going to, by some way, determine which of those two you're going to rely on. So there's, in this case, a number of factors that the scholars can resort to deem one of those weightier than the other. Whichever is the case, the weightier one is going to be called mahfuz, preserved. And the other one that came from a trusted source, but now we're going to reject it, it's called shadh, irregular or anomalous. That's one case. The other case is we still have two reports. One came from a trusted source and one came from a weak source. So just by coming from a weak source, that right there made it what? Marjuh, outweighed. That's easier because it came from a weak source in the first place. So when we have one that came from a weak source, one that came from a strong source, then the weighty one is called ma'ruf, and the outweighed one is called munkar. So you're going to study your mustalah and remember all of that, insha'Allah ta'ala. وَالْفَرْدُ النِّسْبِي إِنْ وَافَقَهُ غَيْرُهُ فَهُوَ الْمُتَابِعُ. The relatively unique report. Relatively unique. What does that mean? That means that somewhere in the chain, somewhere where the reports branched out, someone out of all these reporters, out of all these branches, there's a divergent report. A divergent report, yani a unique report. There's a report that's different from all the other reports. So this one, compared to them, is unique. Al-Fardun Nisbi, the relatively or comparably unique. In wafaqahu ghayruhu, if another report agrees with it, fahu al-mutabi', then that's the case of the follow-up. Each one is a mutabi' for the other. Each one is a mutabi' for the other. A follow-up. وَإِنْ وُجِدَ مَتْنٌ يُشْبِهُهُ فَهُوَ الشَّاهِدُ. And if there were found a text that resembles the one being investigated, then that's the case of the shahid. He means here a text that came from a companion. So not somewhere where it branched off down in the chain, somewhere there's a divergent report. We're talking about at the source of the report. The companion who's reporting from the Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam. He's reporting it his own way. And then there's another report from another companion that has its same meaning. Then this is the case of shahid, yani reference. Each one is a shahid for the other. So then what's the difference between these two cases? The case of the shahid is that the branching is in the origin from the companions, in the origin of the report from the companions. If you go back to the Sahaba who are reporting it, in the first place, they are reporting it with different words. So that's called shahid. And then the other case is beneath the companions, somewhere in the chains where they diverge, there's some divergent reports. So if there's a divergent report that has another one like it, then that's mutabi', follow-up. Each one's a follow-up of the other. وَتَتَبُّعُ الطُّرُقِ لِذَلِكَ هُوَ الْإِعْتِبَارِ. And following up the pathways, yani tracking the pathways for that goal is called i'tibar, regard or consideration. So we're talking about here comparing the hadith books. Any one of those hadith books has thousands of chains in them, thousands of chains. So those scholars, they know those chains. They know how they intersect and how they diverge and etc. ثم المقبول إن سلم من المعارضة. Furthermore, the acceptable report, so that means it's Hasan or Sahih, if it is sound, yani devoid of conflict, al-mu'arada, فهو المحكم, then it's a decisive report. This is muhkam, not with the same meaning of muhkam versus mutashabih in the chapter or the topic of the attributes. This is muhkam with a different meaning. Decisive. A report, a hadith that doesn't have anything that conflicts with it. فَإِنْ عُرِضَ بِمِثْلِهِ. Now, if it is opposed by something like it, yani by another acceptable hadith, فَإِنْ أَمْكَنَ الْجَمْعُ. But it's possible to put them together, to merge them, to explain them in a way that they don't contradict each other. فَمُخْتَلِفُ الْحَدِيث. Then this is an issue whose topic is called مُخْتَلِفُ الْحَدِيث. That's the topic of hadiths, acceptable hadiths that appear to contradict each other, but they don't contradict each other. أو لا, or it's not possible to put them together. وَثَبَتَ الْمُتَأَخِّرُ. And the later one is confirmed, meaning the dates of these are confirmed, meaning we know which one is first and which one is second. That's what it means to say the dates are confirmed. We know which one came before the other. فَهُوَ النَّاسِخُ وَالْآخَرُ الْمَنْسُوخُ. Then this later one, this confirmed later one, that's the abrogating report. And the other is the abrogated. The earlier one is the abrogated report. This is how you can have two authentic hadiths and you can't put them together. You're unable to put them together. And both of them are truly authentic. If there were two truly authentic reports without any way to put them together, it's going to be a case of abrogation. That means there was a prior hadith, then a later one came and abrogated the earlier one. وَإِلَّا فَالتَّرْجِيحِ. Now, if we're not able to do that, so the first thing is we're going to put them together if we're able to. If we're not able to, but we know that one of them came later than the other, so then it's going to be a case of abrogation. But what if we can't do that either? فَالتَّرْجِيحِ. Then we have to resort to preponderance. So that takes us back to where we just left when we were talking about irregular hadith. Looks like it's authentic, but it's not. We need to reject it. It's anomalous. And if there's no way to preponderate which one is the preserved one, if there's no way to determine which one is the preserved one and which one is the anomalous one, ثُمَّ التَّوَقُّفْ, then neutrality, yani stopping there. Then the scholar of hadith, he can't go further. Now he's going to have to stop, and then maybe it will become clear for him which one is authentic. Or it will become clear for someone else, for another scholar, and he will determine if it's authentic, which one is authentic. طيب. Any question, inshallah? This Nukhbat seems to be going pretty smooth. Subhanallah wa bihamdi. The author says, ثُمَّ الْمَرْدُودِ. Then there's the rejected hadith. Now we want to start talking about weak hadiths. إِمَّا أَنْ يَكُونَ لِسَقَطٍ أَوْ طَعْنٍ. It's either going to be due to a drop, meaning someone's missing from the chain, or is going to be due to a jab, a stab, meaning a negative criticism. فَالسَّقَطُ إِمَّا أَنْ يَكُونَ مِنْ مَبَادِئِ السَّنَدِ مِنْ مُصَنِّفٍ. Now, concerning someone dropped from the chain, that would either be from the beginnings of the chain, from the side of the author, of an author, from the side of an author of a hadith compilation, like 40 hadiths of An-Nawawi, you know that one. So he drops the chains. He has those chains, An-Nawawi. He has the chains from himself back to the Prophet, alayhi salatu wassalam, through the books from which he's narrating. He's putting in there hadiths from Bukhari, hadiths from Muslim. But he didn't just go to the store and buy Bukhari and Muslim and pick hadiths out of there. He is an authentic hafiz of hadith An-Nawawi. He has all those books by chain of narration from himself back to the authors, and then the authors are giving you all their hadiths in one book back to the Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam. So he has his own chains, but he dropped them, except for example, whoever's the author of the original book he's taking from. And then he might mention the companion, so he even skips some of that. He'll say, so he skips his chain from himself back to Bukhari and say Al-Bukhari narrated. And then he skips Al-Bukhari's chain and maybe mentions a companion who said what the Prophet said, alayhi salatu wassalam. So on purpose, he did that. This is what Ibn Hajar is talking about now. إِمَّا أَنْ يَكُونَ مِنْ مَبَادِئِ السَّنَدِ مِنْ مُصَنِّفٍ. It would either be from the beginnings of the chain, from an author, yani on the part of an author who did that on purpose, أَوْ مِنْ آخِرِهِ بَعْدَ التَّابِعِ. Or the drop from the chain could be from the end, the other side of the chain, The end after the follower of the companion. After the follower. بعد التابعي. أو غير ذلك. Or other than that. Or other than that. So he gave us three cases here. He said, where's the first case? He says, أن يكون من مبادئ السند من مصنف, that it would be from the beginnings of the chain on the part of an author. That's one. أو من آخره بعد التابعي, or it would be from the other end of the chain, which is the end of the chain, after a tabi'i. That's the second case he gave. أو غير ذلك, or other than that, that's third case. Then he starts naming them. فَالْأَوَّلُ الْمُعَلَّقِ. So the first one, when the chain is dropped intentionally by an author, that's called mu'allaq, a suspended report or suspended hadith. وَالثَّانِي الْمُرْسَلِ. The second is the mursal hadith. So you have in a chain, right? You have the Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam. Then you have the companion. Then you have the tabi'i. Then you have the follower of the tabi'i. Then you have whoever's after him. Okay, so we got four ones here so far. The Prophet, alayhi salatu wasalam, the companion, the tabi'i, that's the follower of the companion, and the follower of the tabi'i, and then keeps going. So let's say there's an author here. A for author. So what did he say here? He said someone could be dropped out of the chain from the beginnings, from the author. So that means here's our author. That means he's omitting all of this chain here, except for example, the Prophet. So for example, all this chain here, he omitted it. So, and he reports the hadith back to the Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam from himself, for example, on purpose. So that's mu'allaq. Then what else do we have? He says, or after him, or from the end of the chain. So that's from this side, the side where the Prophet is and the companion is and the tabi'i is. Ba'da tabi'i says after the tabi'i. After the tabi'i. Yeah, and he's going back this way. After the tabi'i. So that's the, looks like the companion missing from the chain. Looks like. In other words, we have the tabi'i, we have the Prophet, alayhi salatu wassalam, and someone's missing in between them because the tabi'i is not a companion. So the first one, al-awwal, when the author dropped the chain out on purpose or part of the chain, that's called mu'allaq. وَالثَّانِي الْمُرْسَلِ. The second one, when the one after the tabi'i is missing, so it means the one between the tabi'i and the Prophet, that's called mursal. Mursal, that's when the tabi'i is reporting the hadith directly from the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But don't say he dropped the companion out, because maybe he dropped out another tabi'i. We don't know who's between him and the Prophet. So that's called mursal. وَالثَّالِث, in the third case, إن كان باثنين فصاعدا مع التوالي فهو المعضل وإلا فالمنقطع. So the third case here, so we have here the Prophet, the companion, the tabi'i, the follower, and then let's just, for now, we'll put X for the next one, and then X for the next one, and then X for the next one. Okay, and then we have our author here. A is for author. So, When it's the author who's dropping out the chain on purpose from his side, that's called mu'allaq. When the one who's between the Prophet and the Tabi'i is missing from the other side of the chain, that's called mursal. So what about other than that? And don't forget, this blue X here on this C doesn't mean we're saying the Tabi'i dropped out the companion. I just said, we don't know who was between this Tabi'i and the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. There could be 6 Tabi'un between him and the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. So that's the first case. The author drops out the chain from his side. Second case is someone's missing between the Prophet and the companion and the Tabi'i from the other side. Now, third case is, what did he say? In kana bithnaini fasa'idan ma'at tawali. If there's 2 people missing from the chain or more consecutively, 2 or more missing consecutively. So it means, for example, this X is, or let's say this X is out, he's dropped, and this one is dropped. 2 reporters or more consecutively missing from the chain. فهو المعضل, that's the problematic report. وإلا فالمنقطع, and if it's not 2 or more consecutively, then, for example, there's only 1, then that's called munqati'. Or there's more than 1 but not in a row, then that's called munqati', severed. Any question there? That's good, brothers and sisters. Barakallahu fikum. If this is all clear for you, that's very good. Alhamdulillah. That means then we finish this book. That means we can make some progress. If this Nukhbat Al-Fikar is clear for you and you're interested in this subject, because I'm surprised more people are not interested in hadith terminology, but Allah makes people interested in whatever He wills. But if this is clear for you and you're interested in hadith terminology, we can go further. MashaAllah. We finished this Nukhbah. We still have Al-Baykuniyya to go over. That's actually lower than Nukhbah. With its explanation, we have the explanation of Nukhbah to go over. We have the millennial poem of Al-Iraqi to go over. That's master book there. I don't know if we can get there. I'd really like to. If we get there, yani, that's good. ثم قد يكون واضحا أو خفيا. Furthermore, the interruption in the chain could be obvious or obscure. فالأول, the first one, the obvious break in the chain, يدرك بعدم التلاقي, that would be realized by knowing the lack of meeting between the 2 reporters. Yani, if you're the hadith scholar and you're researching the chain, and then you found that Fulan never met Fulan, you knew that, so then you know there's an interruption in the chain. You don't even have to be a hadith scholar sometimes. Sometimes it's obvious for anyone if you just know the history of the people involved. So the first is realized by the lack of meeting between the 2 reporters. وَمِن ثَمَّ احْتِيجَ إِلَى التَّارِيخ, and from there is a need for history, to know the biographies of the people, of the reporters. وَالثَّانِي الْمُدَلَّسِ, and the second case, the case of the obscure interruption of the chain, that's the case of the counterfeited chain. The one that was counterfeited, yani, maybe that's too strong of a word, but the one that was tampered with. Amin wa fikum. Meaning, the one that al-mudallas, that's the one that someone said from so and so, and the one he's naming, he didn't hear from him, but he met him. According to Ibn Hajar, he met him. We're just going to put that in there. He met him, but what he's reporting from him, he didn't hear it from him. But it is from him, though. It is from him, and he never heard it from him. But he did meet him. So it means you can't use the lack of meeting as a proof for a breakage in the chain. But there is a breakage in the chain, so it's obscure. How are you going to discover that? You need to be an expert. وَيَرِدُ بِصِيغَةٍ تَحْتَمِلُ الْلُقِيِّ. And such a tampered chain comes with an expression that does bear the meaning of meeting. It bears the meaning of meeting, of having met the one you're reporting from. Ka'an, like to say from so and so, but you didn't hear it from him. Waqal, and so said, doesn't mean you heard it from him though. But don't be confused there. Just because you said from so and so or so said, that doesn't mean you're doing a trick. In fact, it's acceptable to say from so and so. And it's acceptable to merely say, so-and-so said, that so-and-so said, that so-and-so said. What's not acceptable is to be a trickster when doing it. So if they discover that the one who's doing that is a trickster, then they won't accept his narrations unless he explicitly says that he heard. وَكَذَا الْمُرْسَلُ الْخَفِيُّ مِنْ مُعَاصِرٍ لَمْ يَلْقَ. And likewise, an obscure mursal hadith. Mursal was the one where someone's missing between the follower and the Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam. There's something like that called mursal khafi, which is, this is the case when the report is coming from, or one is reporting from his contemporary, meaning someone who lived at his same time. One is reporting from his contemporary, but he never met that contemporary. So that's an obscure breakage in the chain. From a contemporary mu'asir, from a contemporary that one did not meet. The report from a contemporary that one did not meet. Wallahu a'lam. We'll stop there, and that's pretty much right on time also.